Prime's exclusive wildcard playoff game is Saturday night. Jordan Love and the Packers take on Caleb Williams and the Bears. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game.
That's going to be caught for the touchdown.
NFC North rivals square off in the latest chapter of the NFL's oldest feud. The Packers and Bears in Prime's exclusive wildcard playoff game. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Only on Prime. Sign up for a 30-day free trial today. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Why do growing businesses love working in Slack? Let's ask Christy at RE Bikes.
Running things in Slack saves me so much time.
AI summaries save 97 minutes per week. What say you, Rox from Gosney?
Slack helps us build community, it helps us build connection.
Your partners, vendors and customers all in one place. Take us on home, Ashley from Caraway.
If we didn't have Slack tomorrow, I would explode.
Well, let's not let that happen. Visit slack.com/podcast to get 50% off Slack Business Plus.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork. Then actually drowning. Carol is fighting off sharks with a stapler and pirates are pillaging the office copier and... Then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Año nuevo, los mismos Extra Value Meals en McDonald's. Ahora te puedes llevar 2 snack wraps y papitas y una bebida mediana por solo $8. Solo por tiempo limitado. Precios y participación pueden variar. Los precios pueden ser más altos en Hawái, Alaska y California y con entrega.
Hey all you heroes, hawks, heralds, crows, pirates, and wardens. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we unpack, discuss, and galaxy brain about all the lore behind the Dragon Age series.
We are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From character deep dives to exalted marches and elven gods, we will cover it all.
There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we talk about Dragon Age and its lore. I'm one of your hosts, Austin, also known as Teacup.
And I'm your other host, Shelby or Shecup.
Yes, you are, and we are back. First episode of 2026.
Yes, and number one, this is season 11. Welcome to season 11, Austin and everyone. Secondly, this is our 5th year of this podcast.
Correct.
Which is crazy. So much has happened. We're starting a new season. We finally got Dragon Age 4. We had a baby. And we're about to do our 200th episode. So it's just a really momentous time for the podcast.
Yeah, it really is. And now I'm thinking about the time. Do you remember when we were watching MasterChef and they did season 10 and the entire season? They were like, this is season 10.
This is our season 10, but it's season 11.
Yes. We just did season 10.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about what we're going to be doing in this season. So basically, we're going to be covering the history and the rulers of all the different countries in Thedas. We're going to break it down country by country, going over their roots, their foundations, and then getting into specific, particularly very famous rulers. Most countries are going to get multiple episodes. Unfortunately, there are still a few that we just don't know as much about, but most of what we'll be discussing will be spread out over the whole season. And we are going to go chronologically. But first, you might be wondering, hey, Cups, didn't you already do this in season 1? And I have a rebuttal to that. Yes, on the surface, this season may look a little bit similar, but it's different because season 1 was a very, very, very broad overview of the countries and how they're structured politically. This is going to be much more specific and much more in depth, and we're going to be focused on politics rather than culture. I think I said that backwards. Our season 1 was an overview of the politics, and we gave more in depth into the culture. This is going to be the opposite, where we're much more in depth about the politics and the structure of the country, and more of an overarch of the culture and religion.
Basically, in season 1, when we did this, it was like a bird's eye view of just understanding who the country is.
Mm-hmm.
This is how the country operates.
Yes, and like you're right. That season 1 was like the 1,000-yard stare from up above aerial view. This is like in the weeds, in the trees, like in the nitty-gritty.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think we should just dive right in with our first what we start with every episode.
Which, yes, is fun facts, but just to give you some info before the fun facts, we're starting with Tevinter, as you could have guessed.
Well, it's the first.
Exactly. It is the first human settlement. So we're going to get into their ancient history. But yes, let's get into the fun facts. So number 1, right off the bat, before the Veil Guard, there was never and had never been a female Archon who's the ruler of Tevinter. You can choose to continue this tradition of male leadership in the Veil Guard, or you can usher in some female leadership depending on your choices in the game.
Huh.
Additionally, second, ancient magisters suffered physical mutations as a result of massive lyrium consumption.
So, okay, so I have a moment to pause here with
as
this
you
fun
do.
fact. Could this then mean that Corypheus looks the way he does not because of the taint and darkspawn blight, but because of lyrium consumption?
Yes, that is exactly what that means.
Fascinating.
Very. All right, and then lastly, in the French translation of Origins and Dragon Age 2, the word magister was translated as basically inquisitor. I'm not going to even try to mangle the French. So they translated magister as inquisitor in French, but then obviously this did get changed when Inquisition came out for obvious reasons.
Makes sense, and I am just going to talk without really like having
You're going to talk with no basis of knowledge.
Correct. Other than like what I've experienced by hearing the words in other place. A magistrate, which is something that occurs in our world, is like a judge or a ruling official. Like a lot of times we hear this, there's a mission in DA2 where it's the magistrate's son. Mm-hmm. He's like a judge. And that's what, like, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3, that's Astarion. Astarion was a magistrate in the city, meaning that he heard cases and ruled on should the offending party be...
Are they guilty or not?
Are they guilty or not? And so the magisters and, like, the French root here, like, the word for inquisitor, because the inquisitor is really what it sounds. I know we make a joke about the quizquizitor. Yeah, that one. But, like, that's basically, like, the root words is, like, one who questions, one who seeks, one who investigates and finds out the truth.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other thoughts?
No, that was all my thoughts.
Cool. So let's just dive right into the lore. And I just first want to set the stage. Like, yes, we're going to be talking about ancient Tevinter, and I know we do this all the time. We talk about them frequently, but I want to just give a caveat of one of what I think is the most important things to understand about Thedas, and additionally why we're beginning with Tevinter is because Tevinter is literally the foundation of why and how modern day Thedas is how it is. It's the oldest human nation that's still around, of course, but it also colonized almost, if not the entire continent From Ostagar and the Korkori Wilds to Ravane, all the way over to Western Orlais and the Anderfels, they have had their hands literally everywhere. And they held these territories virtually uncontested for almost 1,000 years.
Right. And I think it's important to note, like, to talk about the structure of Thedas in these other countries would be trying to talk about the history and foundation of Europe without talking about the ancient Greece and the ancient Roman Empire.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Especially the ancient Roman Empire.
You just can't do it.
There was so much influence in that part of the world and everything like that. And it just is, you know, or even just like trying to talk about the formation of England without talking about the conflict between the Danes and the Saxons.
Or trying to talk about the formation of America without acknowledging England. You just can't do it.
No.
So that's why we're starting with Tevinter. And I think we really underestimate how much 1,000 years of rule, pretty much uncontested, impacts the land and the people, even to today when their rule has diminished and waned. But we're not in modern Thedas for today. We're in ancient Thedas. So let's go back into before Tevinter was the Imperium. And in this time, before they united and conquered Arlathan, there were 4 tribes of humans that had split off from one bigger tribe. And they separately created the kingdoms of Berendur, Quirinus, Tevinter, and Neromenian. So there are four tribes and 4 kingdoms that were all situated in where we think of as modern day Tevinter. And significantly, also important to mention, Neromenian is the big overarching tribe that they all split off from.
Interesting.
So I want to talk about each of these 4 tribes. And I want to start with Berendur because we know very little about it. It's often referred to as the lost city of Berendur. It disappeared around minus 1610 ancient, which is about 500 years before the founding of the Tevinter Imperium. It's said to have been located somewhere near the southern coast of the Nosen Sea, which is opposite of Minrathous on the Navarra side in modern day terms. The city is actually said to be one of the wonders of ancient Thedas. It was famous for its fountains that supposedly granted eternal youth. And according to legends and the Codex, Berendur was destroyed by Dumat because the High King, Carinatus, turned away Dumat's high priest. The high priest asked Dumat to destroy the king, and it seems like, for all intents and purposes, he answered. Minrathous then sent soldiers to investigate, and they found only that the entire city had vanished. Brother Genetivi says that nothing of Berendur has ever been found, while Solus says that while exploring Berendur's ruins in the Fade, he saw the city be buried by volcanic ash. This story so far reminds me of 2 cities, places in history. Number 1, Pompeii, covered in volcanic ash, but also Roanoke in America for just disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
And then last thing I have to say about Berendur is that Hessarian claimed that when the Magisters Sidereal were cast out after breaching the Golden City, they fell across the sky and landed where Berendur had once stood.
This is all very, very fascinating, and you know, we get a lot of like the origin of the elves and stuff in DAV, but it still doesn't really explain like humanity and like why. Basically, another thing, like why is it not the elven people who kind of, if the Evanuris are really the old gods, like, I guess my question is like, why is Tevinter human?
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, you know what I mean? Do you see what I'm trying to like?
Well, I think they're human because the writers needed some kind of conflict between humans and elves. But as to your overarching question, I think they just are.
Yeah, I think this is a effort of 15 years of developing this story, along a 10-year development for DAV,
and years before Origins came out too.
Right, and the fact that a lot of the original writers, even though there were a lot of like founding writers on the staff of DAV, I want to acknowledge that, but like we all know that like David Gator was the head writer for a long time. Like, when you lose someone, you lose their knowledge, no matter how much you can document it, and like their understanding of how those things are pieced together. Yeah, and that's just
it's just the way it is. Yeah, I think that plays a factor for sure. All right, let's get into Corinus. And Corinus is founded by the Corinus tribe, but the kingdom is now known as the city of Ventus. It played a very important role in Tevinter's constant war with the Cunari. And Ventus is now located in the far east of Tevinter, just south of Saharon and east of Arlethan. As you can imagine, it is an important defensive point for the country then and now. What we know about it in ancient times is not much, but we do know that High Queen Rathana of Corinus married Durinius, High King of Neuromenion, in minus 1195 ancient, and this is what is measured as the beginning of the Tevinter Imperium.
Interesting. I just like want to just draw a line like Corinus. It's spelled Qarinus for our listeners, and just like its general close relation to Cunari, like and similar in that, and just like makes me wonder again, like this origin thing, like are the Cunari some like failed like Evanurus experiment or something like that with dragons or whatever? Like what are they? And like they're right, it is a constant conflict, not just because of access, but like the Cunari are almost obsessed with holding Ventus.
Yes, they are.
And so I wonder if like there is some like ancestral or like origin kind of need to have like that city.
Yeah, some like destiny like driving them to come back and conquer it. I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thought. I have never even like considered the letters, but you're right. It's only one off. Like if you rearrange Corinus and take out the S, you get Cunari.
Cunaris.
Well, that's not the plural of it, though.
Cunari, I think, is plural.
Yeah,
it's a singular.
Yes, correct.
Plural word.
So, I don't know. I think that's a really interesting thought. Okay, so for the third kingdom, which is Tevinter, ironically enough, we know probably the least about the ancient kingdom of Tevinter from this period of the four. Pretty much all we know is that Durinius' uncle, named Tarsian, was the High King. Now, to get into Neuromenion, which we know the most about them, which is why I've saved it for last, they were the original tribe of humans who came to Thedas, and then they all kind of went their separate ways. And that's I think probably why we have the most information about it. But Neuromenion is also now its own city as well, following the pattern. It's northwest of Virantium, also on the coast of the Nosen Sea. Thalcian, high priest of Dumont and the first, quote-unquote, first blood mage, helped High King Antoridus emerge victorious in wars against a separate human tribe named the Ingirsh. And so they then together enslaved the remaining members of that tribe, proving that Tevinters, Neuromenians in this case, don't just enslave elves. Thalcian would then go on to eventually become the High King of Neuromenion himself. As we mentioned earlier, Durinius would become High King after solving a riddle. And so this is basically the story of this riddle. So the high priests of Toth, Lusicon, and Dumont were the leading candidates to succeed the king. They were tasked to tie an egg in a knot and place it on an enchanted pedestal to unlock the vault where the crown was. Whoever did this first would be the king. As you can imagine, tying an egg in a knot seems impossible. So Durinius' competitors entered the fade convinced of a magical solution. Durinius, however, tore a cloth soaked it in a smashed egg, then tied it in a knot and placed it on the pedestal. It opened and he became king. Stop laughing at smashed egg.
I just really think about sometimes that I didn't even consider smashed egg, but that is hilarious. So I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge that. But there's in the inheritance cycle, which if you've listened to all of our shows, you know that I'm a big fan of that. There's a scene where Aragorn talks to Runoin, who is a smith of the elves and has lived a long time. And Runoin gives him a warning of, like, don't use magic to accomplish everything because it takes away the goal. Like, you lose the actual, like, meaning behind anything. Like, if you can snap your fingers and have anything, what's the point of doing anything?
Right.
And I just think about that of, like, they're convinced, oh, there's a magical solution. We can use our power, whatever, when it is just a simple test of, can you solve problems in a simple way?
Right. Well, I mean, also, I'm reminded of AI and ChatGPT. Like, let's just use that to find solutions that our brains could easily come up with. This principle does not just apply to the ancient Tevinters. It also applies to us.
But it's hilarious. And it's just that moment of, like, oh, there are ways to do things. Like, you can think of the most complicated, but, like, begin with the simplest solution first.
Right, exactly. So back to Durranius. On the eve of his coronation, his mother sits him down and tells him, hey, you are actually the son of High Queen of Tevinter, Queen Livia. She had been deposed and killed by her brother Tarsian as she was in labor birthing Durranius. Calpurnia, who he knew as his mother, was actually his foster adoptive mother. Side note, this Calpurnia is who Inquisition's Calpurnia took her name's inspiration from. So Durranius would then go on to defeat his uncle in a duel, which allowed him to claim the throne of Tevinter. He would later then go on to unite the last tribe of Corinus when he married their queen, as mentioned earlier. The marriage year is when the Tevinter calendar begins in 0 TE, which also corresponds to minus 1195 ancient. And that's the beginning of Tevinter as we know it today. And then I also just want to mention, this is probably, I should have put this in the fun facts, but in modern days, Denarius, separate from Durranius, Denarius was Fenris' slave owner. His estate was in the city of Neomenion.
That's really interesting, just because his name is also
so close
to Durranius. So yeah, that's a really interesting tie back. I also just kind of like the Hamlet vibes of like claiming Tevinter, and that's how he united all the lands or whatever. I also want to talk about Neomenion because of its kind of like ties in there. Like, there's a lot of Lord of the Rings like homages in here. I think like the Neomedians very much feel like the Numenorians to me.
Yes.
And like there's a similar in naming kind of thing. Also, like, again, Tevinter has very big like Roman vibes, and Nero is one of a very like
famous emperor,
infamous emperor of Rome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the ones who are after him who are way worse, but like he began that cycle.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so I just wanted to point out those little language things there. But also with Berendur, it kind of seems like you mentioned Pompeii and Roanoke, but it kind of is a mash of all of these like lost city references that we have. Like, I'm thought of Atlantis, which was like technologically, advanced.
That's
supposedly
true too.
Advanced,
Yeah.
And we lost it and all of that. But also, like, it just reminded me of that, and it also very much sounds like Barad-dûr, which is where Sauron lives.
True. It also reminds me a little bit of Babylon, because Babylon was known for like its famous gardens and fountains, and that's the fountains specifically are Barad-dûr's kind of claim to fame.
Right. That's so interesting too. And like, again, with this Tevinter comparing to these ancient empires that are in this world that, you know, the Babylonian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Greek. I wouldn't even call the Greek an empire, but they did.
You wouldn't call ancient Greece an empire?
Well, not in the same way that like with the Babylonians and the Assyrians, Persians, and
yeah, not in the same way, but I still think they were still interested in conquering. Like, hello, Alexander.
I mean, yes, that is true, and I think, you know, the Greek, they just weren't as united as I think is really where I'm going on. But they are responsible for stopping the Persian Empire expansion, so I'll give them that.
Okay. So if you don't have anything else to say about any of the 4 tribes, we can go to our mid-break.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
I've got this nefarious plan to go around to each of them and secretly tell them all the nasty things you said. That way they'll mutiny and I shall become the group leader.
You know, we have more comfortable rooms and basically infinite space, so why
does the trained assassin prefer a quiet, unassuming spot with good choke points?
Guess you just answered that question.
Besides, I'm closer to the coffee.
Just wondering if the feathered pauldrons are an essential part of the moody rebel mage persona.
What are you talking about?
I'm working on an epic poem about a hopelessly romantic apostate, waging an epic struggle against forces he can't possibly defeat.
What do you mean, can't possibly defeat?
Well, it's not a good story unless the hero dies.
All right, welcome to the middle of the show where we take time to thank our patrons. Thank you so much to all of our patrons, especially our first patrons, Genesis and Lisa M. And patron merch is starting again this year. Join us by the end of January to get on our t-shirts for Q1. And so, yeah, if you join Patreon at our first Enchanter tier, you can get on for the shirts that happen. We give one every quarter, so you'll get 4 shirts in the year if you start now.
1 shirt, 3 stickers.
That's right. My bad. Cut that. So if you join in January for the Q1 shirts, join now, because if you don't join in January, the shirt does not come back. It is 1 shirt and then 3 stickers.
Yeah.
And so join there and you'll get that as patron merch.
Yeah, and we do send out the shirts first in the first quarter, so join now or forever hold your peace.
Yep. All right. And then another great way to support us is to leave us ratings and reviews on Apple or Spotify. And if you leave us 5 stars and some kind words, we'll read it out on a future episode of the show. I do have a comment from YouTube from our War of the Lions episode on YouTube. And this comes from Dallas, and Dallas says, I know that the country of Orleans is modeled off the real-world country of France. I would also argue that the reign of Empress Celine can be attributed to the Elizabeth era of England. She is a woman who was made queen at a very young age and does not have a husband nor plans on taking one. She has a family member who wants to take the throne from her, who is not only much older than she is, but is also has more peers in the country. Yeah, that's a good comparison there for Elizabeth and Celine. I definitely see that comparison there. So thank you so much for that comment. Lastly, come hang out with us on Discord, where we can talk about all the things in Dragon Age and our other shows and all things that happen with the Cups podcasting. If you want to see what stickers and shirts are going out, like, we'll post them there first. That is the first place to find information about our podcast is that Discord server. You can find that link in the episode description, in all our episode descriptions, or on our website, cupspodcasting.com. And I think that's all I have on the show.
All right, let's get back into it.
Yeah, that.
I got you.
My people have heard legends of the Grey Warden's strength and skill, though I suppose not every legend is true.
That's really helpful. What are you, the elven god of sarcasm?
Lies, treachery, and rebellion, depending upon the story. And how could I help? I do not have my ritual dagger. I cannot access my network of mirrors to travel from the lighthouse to anywhere in the world. All I can offer is what I know.
Helpful advice from the elven god of, and I am quoting you here, lies, treachery, and rebellion.
Depending on the story.
You fear barbarians will swoop down upon you.
Yes, swooping is bad.
All right, so we've talked about the ancient period before Tevinter is Tevinter. So I want to talk about the foundations of the Imperium specifically. Because there's a lot of structure here that I really wasn't expecting. So let's talk about what a magocracy is first. Tevinter is the only country in Thedas that is governed solely by magical users, also known as a magocracy. It is important to note, though it is ruled by mages, not all mages are powerful politicians. I have a quote from the Magisterium Codex in Inquisition that highlights this that I found was interesting. It says this: there is a mistaken impression outside the Tevinter Imperium that a magister is simply a mage, and that the mere act of being a mage is all that is required to be among the ruling class. A misperception aided, no doubt, by some Tevinter mages claiming the title outside their homeland to take advantage of its reputation. In truth, being a magister requires one hold a seat in the magisterium, the upper house of the Imperial Senate.
Interesting. This reminds me of like the title Lord in England refers to someone who sits in the House of Lords.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of times, like, you think Lord, like you're the Lord of the estate, you rule over that. But like in England politics, if you are a Lord, that means that you are a member of the House of
Lords. And then there's the House of Commons.
Yes, which are like your normal representatives and things like that. And I just think about that because the House of Lords probably have other titles.
Yes,
other than
certainly,
Lord,
yeah.
like their Duke or Baron or whatever their title would be in there. And I just think about that, and this is very similar. I also just think about all the magisters we meet in the game before DAI, and like if they're actually magisters or they're just like basically trying to like bullshit their way into making them a big deal.
Very fair. I think the ones we meet in Origins, the slavers, they are definitely lying.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So let's get into the government a little bit. And this is where I learned a lot too. The government of Tevinter is split into a few different branches. First, there's the Archon, who is the executive supreme ruler. And then second is the legislative branch, which is the Imperial Senate. The Imperial Senate is then split further into the Magisterium and the Publicanium. So you can kind of compare this to American politics, right? Like the Archon is the president, and then there's Congress, which is split into the Senate and the House. So you can kind of tell even from that comparison, the Magisterium is more powerful than the Publicanium. Though in American history, it should be noted, the Senate is a little bit more powerful than the House, but like they're intended to be equal. That is not the case in Tevinter. The Magisterium has always and will always be more powerful than the Publicanium.
Well, and like this is another thing of like, let's compare back to England, because I think the House of Lords and the House of Commons is a good kind of comparison here, because for a long time of English history, the House of Lords
was the only one.
They were the ruling, like even the House of Commons, when they came in with Parliament, like the House of Lords had more power. But now in modern day England, like the House of Commons is really like
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure the House of Lords like still weighs in on things, but they're not as strong as the House of Commons, because like the nobility and the monarchy has lost all like official political power other than like influence and station of their place.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think England's monarchy is one of the only ones that has any power left in their country. I really do think that. I mean, there are so many ways that, like, yes, Charles is a figurehead, but he also like controls so much land, so much money. Parliament does have to send things in front of him, and it's not that way in most all of the other European countries with monarchies.
Interesting. But he doesn't approve them. Like they can.
There are some things he does, yeah. And usually it's just, okay, he rubber stamps this, whatever, but there are some things that he could say, no, I'm not going to do this, if he wanted to exercise that power.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I am learning. Again, I want to assure the listeners that I do often talk sometimes without like just going on my general understanding.
You just start yapping.
Yeah, I talk on my general understanding of the topic, and I am often and probably wrong.
Okay. Anyway, so let's get into the differences, right, between the Magisterium and the Publicanium, because we're not a history podcast. We are a Dragon Age podcast. So the Magisterium is the upper house of the Imperial Senate. They make and update laws and rules governing Tevinter. They are in charge of the Imperial Templars. They are in charge of the Circles of Magi. They choose a new Archon if needed, but mostly they squabble amongst themselves. Their infighting is notorious and assassinations are frequent. True Magisters are the utmost power in Tevinter. Most of the current Magisters are Magisters due to being granted the privilege by an Archon in the past, which also includes it going down through your family lineage. So we do know a lot of the current Magisters. So we have one from each of the 7 circles of Magi. First enchanters are not eligible. Every Grand Cleric of the Imperial Chantry, the Imperial Divine, the Imperial Archon can appoint new Magisters at any time, and all Magisters whose families have been appointed previously. So there are a lot of them.
I have a question then. So the Archon is not a part of the Magisterium.
Right. They're separate. They're their own thing.
But is it often that the Archon comes from the Magisterium?
Yes. Always.
Always. Okay. So like Archon Radonus was at one point Magister Radonus.
Yes. And we'll get into why when we get into the Publicanium.
Okay, cool.
So the Publicanium is the lower house of the Imperial Senate, and they are an elected body, but they have no true power. They cannot make laws, they cannot amend laws, and they do not regulate any institute other than themselves. They essentially rubber stamp whatever the Magisterium does and exists almost solely to placate non-mages. So an Archon would never come from the Publicanium.
Right.
In theory, it would be possible, and I'm sure this may have happened in history. It could be possible for the Archon to name an heir who is not part of the Magisterium. Though rare, I would say.
But the Magisterium, they have to be a mage.
Yes. Like, the Publicanium, they do not.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember, like, the Magister rank, if I remember from our overview of Tevinter, like, is a rank within a family. Like, if you are just a mage who's not a Magister, it's like you're an Altus or something like that is what it's called.
Yes, that's what Dorian is in Inquisition.
Until he's Magister Palvis.
Yes.
After his father is assassinated.
And I should mention there are a couple notable exceptions to this conversation, which we will discuss in future episodes.
All right.
All right, so I want to give a note on social classes in Tevinter, because as you know, as we were discussing, anybody who's not a mage is pretty much completely downtrodden in the country, but they still do have specific social classes, almost like a caste system. And so we've kind of already touched on this, but at the bottom are slaves, self-explanatory. They don't have any rights. They're mostly elves, but there are other races too. Primarily still elven and human. Occasionally with dwarves and Kunari as well, can only be via the last will and testament of their owner or freed before a judge with the owner present to make that decree. That's the only way you can become not a slave in Tevinter. And then Liberati are legally freed former slaves. They are not considered citizens of Tevinter, so therefore they have little to no rights. They can become apprentices in a trade or join a circle of magi, as well as they can own land or property. However, they cannot join the military or the government.
Right. I have a question about Tevinter slavery that you might not know the answer to, which is just, is it generational slavery?
I don't know. I think so, but I'm not 100% certain.
Right. And if you're confused by what I mean, is like when you think about slaves in the Roman Empire, like it was not generational slavery. Like it was still bad. It was still terrible. I'm not trying to say that, but if you were born to a slave, that didn't automatically make you a slave.
Right. Like, the reason I say, and I'm not certain, but the reason I say yes, slavery in Tevinter is generational is because they make it so hard to be freed. Usually in a system like ancient Rome, ancient Greece, a lot of our ancient cultures, slavery was not generational. There's another term for it, I don't know. And so it's easier to get free. Like there's not this whole rigmarole with like going before a judge.
Right. And I think it's important to note that generational slavery at least is a little weird concept for our ancient world, because a slave even then, and even in American history, like was not considered human. Like a slave was property and was treated as laws as property. And so it doesn't make sense in a thing of like, well, I guess, if you own a cow and that cow births a calf, that calf is yours.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah.
So my point is invalid.
Okay.
But yeah, let's move on.
All right. So the next level, we talked about the Liberati. The next level is the Soperati, and they are citizens of the Imperium who are not mages. Mostly humans. They can own property and they can serve in the military, but they don't have any real power. They can become Latins, which is the next step up, if they have a child who becomes a mage. Now, Latins are mages and their families who are born into historically non-magical lineages. There is a historic tension between Latins and the Altus, which is the level above them. And the Altus mages are those who can trace their lineage back to the magisters who first breached the Fade. They are typically among the highest ranking mages in the magisterium and are typically all magisters.
Interesting. So this is a really interesting point to talk about larger Thedas, because like for most of Thedas, Ferelden, Orlais, the Anderfels, Rivain, maybe not Rivain, but Navarra, all these, like having a child born a mage is like the parent's greatest fear, because of the danger, because of that child being taken away. Like, but in Tevinter, it could be a parent's greatest hope. Like, I hope my child is born a mage, because it would increase
our social status. But then also simultaneously, having a child who's not a mage is an Altus's biggest fear. So
it just is an interesting dichotomy when you like reframe the way that happens. And like magic is still terrifying in Tevinter. Like it's not like the everyday people have the same fear of magic that in Tevinter that the everyday people in or the rest of Thedas do. It just is like, as a society, is probably viewed a lot differently.
Very, very. All right, so I want to talk about who and what the Archon actually is, because the rest of our episodes on Tevinter will be on the different Archons. So essentially, the Archon is the president, the CEO, the king, the head ruler of the government of Tevinter. It's typically an inherited position, either through lineage of blood or lineage of training under the previous Archon. There have been many instances throughout history where the Archon has denoted their heir as not their biological child. So that's not that uncommon. It's important to note, though, that the Magisterium technically can elect the Archon if needed. This typically only happens if the Archon dies without an heir. Speaking of heirs, you might be tempted to think that the heirs come from the Magisterium, but this isn't always true. Only a mage who is not part of the governing body can be named as an heir to an Archon. This rule has been in place since the Black Age, which is the 400s. In modern times, heirs cannot also have a role in the Imperial Senate or the Imperial Chantry. So this is a really important check on the Magisterium's power.
Yes, because they can't just elect.
They can't just elect from their own body.
Right, which is interesting because that's the choice we make in DAV.
No, that's not the choice we make in DAV. The choice we make in DAV is who's going to be the next Archon. We're not choosing the heir. There is no Archon.
Right.
It's a very minor distinction, but it is an important one.
Thank you for the clarification, because that is exactly right. So that is really interesting because, like, in theory, like, for example, before Dorian's father died, Archon Radonus could have named Dorian his heir because he didn't sit on the Magisterium.
Right. Exactly. But he didn't. Right. I don't know if we know. I guess he didn't have an heir, or the heir died. We don't know.
Right. And like, just to kind of express checks and balances here, like, the Archon might not like appoint the next Magister. Like, if you have historically had that, it's lineage, but the Archon can create as many Magisters as they want.
Exactly.
I mean, I think there's politics in there if they make that move or not.
Yeah.
Because there's what you can do and what you should strategically do. So I don't think like they would do that, but in theory, that is the check that, like, okay, you all are not behaving. Here's 20 new Magisters that are handpicked by me.
Yep. True. So, Tevinter believes that the role of the Archon is a divine appointment. Similar to how many monarchies throughout our history believe or believed that they rule because God wants them to. In Tevinter, who that God is, though, has changed over the years from the old gods to the Maker. Archons, interestingly, they can come from either the Latent or the Altus class. Only 1/3 of the Archons throughout history have been Latents. So the vast majority are Altus. Archon Tidarion was the first non-Altus Archon, which was a huge controversy and even led to a civil war that lasted for over 70 years. This was in the -600s ancient. The war only ended when Latents were admitted to the Magisterium. The Altus pushed back so much on this because it threatened their theology of magic, that it was bestowed by the old gods rather than an accident of birth. Additionally, Archons technically have the power to overrule laws passed by the Magisterium, but they do exercise this power very rarely. The most coveted power of the Archon, as you mentioned earlier, Austin, is the ability to appoint new Magisters. So the ruling families actively vie for the favor of the Archon. Now I want to go back to Durenius, is my last point. As the first Archon, Durenius chose the image of a hooded ferryman as the symbol and seal of the office of the Archon. Every Archon since then has worn a ring depicting this ferryman on the third finger of his right hand. Upon the death of the Archon, the ring is ceremonially crushed in front of the assembled magisters, so that no one can use the power of the Archon until a new one has been crowned and sworn in. However, according to the Codex, this tradition has been circumvented. Quote, a forgery can be substituted and ritually destroyed in place of the ring of the ferryman. This one bears the name of Archon Hadarius, but whether it's the true ring or the forgery is impossible to discern. I wanted to end with this because I think it's a really good point to illustrate how Tevinter and how the Archon's role specifically is inspired by so many different things throughout history. So like we have the theology of like being appointed by God, which most monarchies have. We have the more democratic roles of the president, but also we have similarities now to the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that's a really interesting convergence of all of these different ideas.
Right. And like you're thinking about, like, I believe like the papal ring is destroyed and then reforged when there's a new pope.
Yeah.
And it just is really interesting. But like I'm focused a little bit on, I love that point of the ferryman, because I do want to, before we kind of end and move into our side character, dealing with the fact that DAV basically says the old gods were the Evanuris. Faladin is the ferryman.
True.
Like that is his
That's
role.
his role in the pantheon of the Evanuris.
Right. So I just think that that's interesting, of like ways I'm seeing in the lore that like these Evanuris might appear in different ways, because you would think, like, as we said when we talked about this, you would think, oh, Elgernon is 1-for-1 for Dumont, because Dumont is the head god and Elgernon is not, but Elgernon is Lusicon.
Yeah.
Like, these are just really interesting things to me.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think that you definitely see that with the ferryman a lot. I hear that for sure. All right. So do you have any other final thoughts on Tevinter before we get into our side character?
I would totally watch a show that is just like about the magisterium and their
the political drama of the magisterium,
like a political drama of the magisterium, and like it can be serious and like really terrible, but like I would watch that, of like to watch the different families like vie for things, though it would be hard to root for any of the families, because you'd be like, yeah, but you all probably own slaves, so
yeah, I think they can make it work. Yeah. I mean, they make shows
we root
from
for
history,
Dorian.
Right? Exactly, true. Yeah, I think Tevinter's so interesting because the lore is just so well written. And that's just what it comes down to. But I do want to transition us into our side character. And before we do that, though, I'm pretty sure all of our side characters for our Tevinter section, they're all magisters. So we are starting off today with one that should be quite familiar to you Origins lovers out there. And while this magister doesn't technically appear, an item of theirs plays a major role in a main quest of Origins. We're talking about Magister Adralla, who is the author of the Litany of Adralla. But I want to back up before we get into that. Adralla was a magister in Tevinter and lived in Virantium during the Black Age. She was extremely knowledgeable about blood magic. However, contrary to what you might imagine for a Tevinter magister, she was not a blood mage. Her expertise was dedicated to the academic study of it. The Codex says that, quote, she was a deeply pious mage, and she was renowned in her day for having found a counter to every form of mind control, a defense against dreamwalkers, and even counterspells to demonic summons, end quote. At the request of Divine Clements I in 446 Black, she recorded this knowledge into a book, which would then become the Litany of Adralla. Essentially, the litany dispels and prevents blood magic from being used in its presence. If you are not familiar, this book plays a role in Origins' Broken Circle quest and in the novel Asunder. In Origins, you use it to defeat the blood mage Uldred, and it can also be used in combat to do large amounts of damage to abominations. Additionally, Lord Seeker Lambert also uses it in Asunder against Cole and Reese when they encounter him beneath the White Spire. As you can probably imagine, a book that prevents the use of blood magic would not be particularly popular in Tevinter, and it certainly was not. 3 different magisters, at least that we know about, committed assassination attempts against Magister Adralla, and so she fled Tevinter and spent the rest of her life in Ferelden. And that's how the book gets to Ferelden. Wynne claims that Adralla was also a bard. We are not sure if she meant like an Orlesian bard or simply a player of music. Now, she was from Tevinter and moved to Ferelden, so it's entirely possible that she passed through Orlais and that she picked up bardic training en route, but we'll never know. And that's what we know about Magister Adralla.
It's really, really interesting. Just like this tie of, you know, we start Origins of like, oh, these Tevinter Magisters are such boogeymen. They caused like the destruction of the world. And then we stop blood magic in this person from destroying the entire circle with something from a Magister.
From Tevinter, yeah.
From Tevinter.
It's like our blood mage and their counter. Like,
right.
It's so backwards what they say it is.
But I also think, like, I feel like the Tevinter Magisters who try to assassinate her and dispel this are a little short-sighted because, like, this, if you could ensure that you're the only one with this, that is a major power play against the politics of the Magisterium.
True. And to be fair, we don't know why, technically. We can assume why they committed assassination attempts. Maybe they wanted it for themselves. But I also think I agree with you, though. It is short-sighted because, like, it would be the ultimate kind of fuck you to the Chantry and to the other countries of Thedas to say, well, we are the ones that have a counter to blood magic. You don't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Can you imagine using that on the Bloodbath lady in DAV?
It would have been really convenient.
It would have been
but
really
like
funny.
It's in the below the White Spire of Orlais. So like drowning. It's probably long gone.
Exactly.
All right.
But
I
yeah,
think that's it.
I do think she's really interesting, and I really enjoyed this episode. I'm always fascinated by Tevinter. I also hate Tevinter, so I want to say that in there. Like, they are a terrible country that does terrible things to terrible people.
Yes.
But
yes,
so do
yes.
Ferelden and Orlais. So we'll...
No country's perfect.
Right.
That's a underlying assumption of every episode we ever have. Nobody's perfect.
But I think that, like, this episode really reminded me, like, why I love this series so much, because there is so much detail and so much intentionality and thought put into establishing how this country is supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, we might not ever experience that in a game, and we experience a little bit in, like, the Absolution show and some other, like, Tevinter Knights stuff and like that, but, like, knowing it creates like a bigger world that's playing a part in that. And I just really appreciate that. And I appreciated this episode. Thank you so much for bringing this show together. I enjoyed it as always. Thank you all for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's easily the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. You can find us there on patreon.com/DragonAgeLorecast.
The Dragon Age Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
When a wasteland detective and a vault girl cross paths, no criminal is safe.
You're both under arrest.
Don't move a muscle if you know what's good for you.
Based in Bethesda's Fallout series, follow Walter and Bunny as they traverse the Texas Commonwealth and New Vegas, busting big crime rings.
We'll need all we can to expand into Vegas territory.
And surviving anything the wasteland can throw at them.
It's him! It's the Mothman!
Featuring a series of nail-biting narratives and guest stars from across the Fallout community. It's anybody's guess what thrilling case is up next.
War never changes, does it, Bunny?
No, it certainly does not.
True Vault Escapades, a Fallout audio drama. Available anywhere you get podcasts.